Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're exploring spiritual growth, but with a little bit of a twist. We're going to be looking at a message from Jeremiah Adegbola of the Rhythms of Grace Center. And he uses a pretty unexpected analogy. He compares you to a brand new smartphone.
It is a unique way to frame it. But if you think about it,
Mm-hmm.
smartphones are packed with potential, right? All these amazing capabilities
Mm-hmm.
just waiting to be used.
Okay, I see where he's going with this.
Yeah.
But, do we really have all those spiritual apps pre-installed, so to speak?
That's exactly Adegbola's point. As believers, we are already equipped with everything we need to thrive spiritually. And those gifts, they might not be immediately apparent, just like you wouldn't know all the things your phone can do until you start exploring.
So if we're like these amazing devices, why do so many of us struggle with spiritual growth? What's holding us back from using all those pre-installed features?
Well, Adegbola identifies three main obstacles: damage, flat battery, and being a naive user. So let's start with damage.
Okay, that sounds pretty serious. Is he talking about sin?
Exactly. Sin can be anything that hinders our spiritual connection and growth. It's kind of like dropping your phone and cracking the screen.
Mm-hmm.
It can still function,
Yeah.
but not at its full potential.
So we need to be careful not to drop our spiritual selves, so to speak.
Yeah.
But how do we prevent that kind of damage? It's not like we can put a screen protector on our souls.
Well, that's where self-awareness and reflection come in. We need to be mindful of the choices we make and the habits we form, what patterns of behavior might be creating that damage.
That's a good point. It's easy to kind of go through life on autopilot and not really think about the impact of our actions on our spiritual well-being.
And this is where Adegbola's message gets really interesting. He's not just pointing out the problem. He's offering a solution. He's urging us to stop engaging in those damaging behaviors and remember who we truly are.
Okay, so we need to be aware of the damage and actively work to prevent it. But what about the second obstacle, a flat battery? What does that look like in the context of our spiritual lives?
Well, think about what happens when your phone's battery dies. It becomes useless, right? It can't perform any of its functions. And Adegbola is saying the same thing can happen to us spiritually when we neglect our connection to a higher power.
So prayer and other spiritual practices are like plugging ourselves in to recharge.
That's a great way to put it. It's about finding ways to nourish our souls
Mm.
and maintain that vital link to the divine energy that sustains us.
But what if someone is new to all this? They might not even know where to start with recharging their spiritual battery.
That's where exploration comes in. There are countless ways to connect with the divine, from traditional prayer and meditation to spending time in nature or engaging in acts of service. The key is to find what resonates with you and commit to it consistently.
So it's not about following a rigid set of rules, but rather discovering what personally feeds our souls.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a relationship with the divine. And like any relationship, it requires time,
Mm.
attention,
Mm.
and nurturing.
I love how he emphasizes that. It's about a personal connection, not just going through the motions. But let's move on to the third obstacle he mentions, being a naive user. What does he mean by that?
It's a fascinating point. Imagine having the most advanced smartphone on the market, but you only know how to make calls and send texts. You're completely missing out on all the other incredible features, right?
So he's saying we might be limiting ourselves because
Yeah.
we don't understand the full potential of our spiritual smartphone.
Precisely. We might have all these amazing apps pre-installed, like the capacity for deep prayer, profound compassion,
Yeah.
or intuitive understanding. But we just haven't learned how to use them yet.
No, it makes a lot of sense. But how do we become more savvy users? Where's the user manual for our spiritual selves?
Adegbola emphasizes the role of the Holy Spirit as our guide and teacher. He also highlights the importance of practices like prayer, worship, and meditation, which can help us connect more deeply with our inner wisdom and access those hidden features.
So it's not just about having the potential, but also about actively seeking knowledge and understanding.
Exactly. It's about intentionally developing our spiritual intelligence.
Mhm.
And that involves a willingness to explore, to step outside our comfort zones, and to be open to new ways of experiencing the divine.
It's like taking a class or watching tutorials to learn how to use all the advanced features of our phone. We might need to invest some time and effort, but the rewards are well worth it.
Absolutely. And just like with technology, there's always something new to discover in our spiritual journey.
This is all starting to click for me, but there's one statement from Adegbola that really struck me. You lack nothing, you've only stayed in disobedience. That's pretty powerful. What's he getting at there?
It is a bold statement, and it challenges us to confront some common misconceptions. Adegbola is essentially saying that We often focus on what we perceive as lacking, whether it's faith, strength, or guidance, when in reality we already possess everything we need. It's our choices, our disobedience, that prevent us from accessing and utilizing those gifts.
So it's not about acquiring more, but about removing the obstacles that are blocking our access to what we already have.
Exactly. It's about shifting our perspective from one of lack to one of abundance. And that starts with recognizing the inherent potential within ourselves and taking responsibility for our spiritual growth.
I like how Adegbola doesn't sugarcoat things. He uses strong language like stop and remember to call us to action. It's not about passive acceptance, but about making conscious choices that align with our spiritual purpose.
And that's what makes his message so empowering. You see, he's not just presenting an idea, he's offering a pathway to transformation.
Okay, so we've talked about the three obstacles: damage, a flat battery, and being a naive user. We've also touched on the idea of shifting our mindset from lack to abundance. But how do we actually put all of this into practice?
That's where self-awareness and intentionality come in. We need to identify the specific areas where we might be damaged, discharged, or underutilizing our spiritual potential. Then we can start exploring the practices and resources that can help us heal, recharge, and become more skillful users of our spiritual smartphone.
So it's about taking those concepts that we've been discussing
Right?
and translating them into concrete actions.
Precisely. And that's where Adegbola's phone analogy becomes so useful. It provides a framework for understanding our spiritual growth and empowering us to take ownership of the process.
Let's break it down a bit further. We talked about damage being like sin. What are some practical steps we can take to repair that damage and prevent further harm?
Well, it starts with honestly assessing our behaviors
Right.
and identifying the patterns that are hindering our spiritual growth.
Hmm.
For example, if we're constantly engaging in negative self-talk, that's a form of damage that we need to address. Or if we're harboring resentment towards someone, that's another area where we need to focus on healing.
So it's about taking responsibility for our actions and making amends where necessary.
Exactly. And it's also about developing practices that promote spiritual well-being,
Hmm.
such as forgiveness, gratitude,
Hmm.
and compassion.
What about staying charged up? We talked about prayer and connecting with the divine, but what does that look like in a practical sense?
It's about finding the practices that nourish your soul and help you experience a sense of connection to something greater than yourself. It could be traditional prayer, meditation, spending time in nature, engaging in acts of service, or connecting with a spiritual community. The key is to find what resonates with you and commit to it consistently.
So it's not about following a rigid set of rules, but rather discovering what personally helps us connect to that source of spiritual energy.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a relationship with the divine. And like any relationship, it requires time, attention, and nurturing.
And finally, let's talk about becoming more savvy users. If we're not living up to our full potential, how do we even begin to figure out which app we need to learn to use better?
It's a journey of self-discovery. Think about the times you felt most alive, most connected, most aligned with your purpose. What were you doing then? What aspects of your spiritual smartphone were you utilizing?
That's a great question to reflect on. And I guess if we're feeling stuck or unfulfilled, it might be a sign that we're neglecting certain features or not using them to their full capacity.
Exactly. Maybe you've been relying too heavily on logic and reason and neglecting your intuition. Or perhaps you've been focusing so much on your own spiritual growth that you've forgotten the importance of service to others.
So it's about finding balance and exploring the full range of our spiritual operating system.
Precisely. And remember, this is an ongoing process. Just like technology is constantly evolving, so too is our spiritual understanding. There's always more to learn and new depths to explore.
This whole conversation has been so eye-opening. I love the way Adegbola uses this simple analogy to convey such profound truths. It's really made me think about my own spiritual journey in a whole new way.
Yeah, and that's the power of a good analogy. It can take something complex and make it accessible and relatable. But ultimately, the real work happens when we take those insights and apply them to our own lives.
So for all of you listening out there, what stood out to you in this deep dive? What resonated with your own experiences? And most importantly, what's one small step you can take today to become a more conscious and skillful user of your own spiritual smartphone?
Maybe it's committing to a daily practice of prayer or meditation, or perhaps it's reaching out to someone you've been meaning to forgive. It doesn't have to be a grand gesture. Even a small step in the right direction can have a ripple effect on your entire spiritual journey.
And if you're feeling overwhelmed or unsure where to start, Remember Adegbola's message, you lack nothing. All the resources and potential you need are already within you. It's simply a matter of tapping into that power and allowing it to guide you on your path.
That's a beautiful thought to leave our listeners with. May we all continue to explore our spiritual smartphones with curiosity, courage, and a deep trust in the divine guidance that's always available to us.